When the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ arrived in Yathrib, the journey of persecution has ended, but the journey of responsibility had just begun. For more than a decade, the Muslims have lived as a hunted minority. They had endured mockery, violence, exile and loss. Now for the first time they had a city that welcomed them. But Medina was not yet a state. It had no army, no treasury, no borders, and no shared identity. It was a city of strangers, people bound by faith, but still divided by tribe, memory, and history. What stood before them was not comfort, but a challenge. Could a community built on belief survive in the world ruled by power? The first task of the Prophet ﷺ was not military, nor political, it was social. He gathered the Muhajirun, those who had left everything behind in Mecca, and Anṣar, those who opened their homes in Medina. Then he paired them one by one. This was not symbolic, it was binding. A man who had wealth was now responsible for a man who had nothing. A man with land welcomed a man with no home. A stranger became family, not by blood, but by faith. This was unheard of in Arabia. Tribal loyalty had defined survival for centuries, but now loyalty was being redrawn. The Prophet ﷺ was dismantling the old social order and replacing it with something radical, where dignity came from belief, not lineage. Some of the Anṣar offered half of their wealth. Others offered their homes. All offered sincerity. This was not charity, it was transformation. A quiet revolution was taking place, not enforced by law, but sustained by trust. With unity forming inside the community, the Prophet ﷺ turned to the wider city. Medina was not inhabited by Muslims alone. The Jewish tribes had lived there for generations alongside the pagan clans. If this new society was to survive, it needed structure. The Prophet drafted a document, later known as the Constitution of Madinah. It recognized Muslims and Jews as distinct religious communities, but bound them together as one political body. Each group retained its belief, but shared responsibility for the city's defense. Justice would not be tribal, loyalty would not be selective. Most importantly, the Prophet was established as the final arbiter in disputes. For the first time in Arabia, authority was anchored in justice rather than force. Some accepted it willingly, others compiled outwardly, while the resentment quietly took root. Medina was becoming organized, but peace was fragile. At the heart of this new society stood the Masjid. Masjid an-Nabawi was not only a place of prayer, it was the center of leadership, education, consultation, and refuge. Here the Prophet taught, here decisions were made, here disputes were resolved. And near its walls lived the people of Sufa, men who owned nothing but dedicated their lives entirely to learning and worship. They were poor by worldly standards, but honored by the Prophet. Their presence sent a clear message. In this new society, value was not measured by wealth, but by devotion and character. Medina was not becoming powerful, it was becoming principled. But not everyone welcomed this transformation. Some Jewish tribes watched carefully, unsettled by the Prophet's growing influence. Hypocrisy began to emerge. People who outwardly aligned with Islam but inwardly feared its implications. And in Mecca, Quraysh watched from a distance with rising anger. Their former victims had not disappeared, they had regrouped. A community was forming, disciplined, united, and guided. And Quraysh understood something dangerous. Islam was no longer vulnerable. In the second year after the Hijrah, word reached Medina of a Qurayshi trade caravan returning from Syria. It was heavily laden with wealth built from the resources once seized from the Muslims of Mecca. The Prophet saw an opportunity. This was not about bloodshed, it was economic pressure, a way to challenge Quraysh dominance and assert that persecution would not go unanswered. A small group set out, lightly armed, unprepared for war. The Quraysh responded. Pride mobilized. Abu Sufyan, leading the caravan, sensed danger and rerouted. He sent word to Mecca. Quraysh reacted swiftly and arrogantly. Instead of protecting the caravan alone, they mobilized an army of 1,000 men, armed, armored, and confident. Their goal was not defense, it was punishment. This was the moment of decision. He consulted the companions. The Muhajirun spoke, then the Anṣars were asked. One voice from the Anṣar rose with clarity and resolve. If you command us to cross the sea, we will follow you. The Ummah had spoken. They would stand together. At Badr, the Muslims camped, outnumbered, under-equipped, uncertain. That night, rain fell. The ground beneath the Muslims firm, their hearts steadied. The Prophet spent the night in prayer. He raised his hand and pleaded, "O Allah, if this group is destroyed today, you will no longer be worshipped on this earth." This was not confidence, it was reliance. Morning came and the two armies stood against each other. Three men from the Quraysh stepped forward: Utbah ibn Rabi'a, his brother Shayba, and his son Al-Walid ibn Utbah. Three Muslims answered: Hamza, Ali, Ubaydah. The first blood was shed. Then the battle unfolded. Confusion struck Quraysh ranks. Fear replaced certainty. Discipline unraveled. The Muslims advanced, not with strength, but with resolve. Help came from where it was unseen, and before the sun reached its peak, the battlefield fell silent. Quraysh fled. 70 were killed, 70 captured. Among the dead was men who once mocked, tortured and plotted murder. Abu Jahl was gone. Umayyah ibn Khalaf lay fallen. The era of unchecked arrogance had ended. The Prophet forbade revenge. Prisoners were treated with dignity. Some were released for ransom. Others taught children to read in exchange for freedom. Justice was measured. Mercy was deliberate. This was no conquest. It was correction. At Badr, the Muslims did not win because they were powerful. They won because they were sincere. They did not have numbers. They did not have wealth. They did not have armor. They had Allah. And with that victory, the Ummah took its first breath as a nation. Badr would be remembered forever, not as a battle of sword, but as the moment truth stood firm against falsehood. The rise of a nation had begun.